Good paper YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and I was up at 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday just to make sure I can get a first glimpse of what was to come. And I was already really excited because I knew that it was the 10th anniversary of the Black Bay, and as many of you know, I have a very soft spot for the Black Bay, having owned 3, and I love Tudor as well because of my Pelagos, my beloved Pelagos. But instead of posting a video immediately right after that, just about the new releases, I figured that I would wait and just calm down a little bit and just really take in what was released because there's so much happened. And I'm glad that I did wait because the Black Bay Pro hit me like a train and I was just so excited by it, but there were some developments that took me in a little bit of a roller coaster ride. So in this video, I'm gonna go over the details of the Black Bay Pro and why I love it so much and why the Black Bay GMT was pretty much impossible given the circumstances, and then I'm gonna dive into the whole thickness problem and why I think that it's not really gonna be too much of an issue in real life. And that's not based on opinion, it's based on logic and math and having way too much free time to do tedious and pedantic watch proportion measurements and calculations. But yeah, I love detailed dimensions. I give it in every single review video over here. So yeah, I wanted to get to the bottom of this. So yeah, let's just get into it. So as you know, it was the 10th anniversary of the Black Bay, and while I wasn't expecting the Black Bay Pro, I still really love the Black Bay Pro. I mean, it's almost perfect for me, and the only thing that could have made it a bit more perfect was if it had a rotatable bezel of some sort, like a Black Bay 58 GMT. But, I am still in love with this because, I love the 39mm size, I love steel bezels on watches, and I love GMTs. So, yeah, I mean, it's unbelievably good. It's like they smashed together all of my favorite GMTs put together and into a single watch that I absolutely love. And on top of that, it's priced at $4,000, which is just mind-bogglingly good value, and it's just so nice to be surprised by how inexpensive a watch is. As of late, it feels like every single watch is just getting more and more expensive. So yeah, it's just a kind of a breath of fresh air. So the overall look is very classic and obviously very much like the Rolex Explorer II 1655, and I don't mind that in the slightest bit because the 1655 Explorer II is my favorite vintage Rolex, bar none. And yeah, I mean, but I am kind of glad that they didn't just just straight up rip off the 1655. I mean, they took that watch and then just like pounded in some Tudor in it, and it ends up having quite, I wouldn't say quite, it has a different vibe, I guess I can say. I mean, it's kind of like just like the less weird cousin of the 1655. So one of the main differences is that the GMT hand has a Tudor snowflake instead of the Freccione arrow hand, which is a nice change to make it more Tudor. And the hand itself is tapered, which is kind of like on the Freccione, but it is different from the Black Bay 41 GMT, where the GMT hand is not tapered. And visually, this makes for a pretty big difference. And then the color of the GMT hand is yellow instead of orange or red for the Black Bay GMT. So it gives me, very strong North Flag vibes, which I'm really liking. And yeah, it just gives the watch a much more modern and pro feel, which is, considering that they named it Pro. So next up are the indices, and they seem to have some sort of like very, very light patina action going on. I mean, it changes in different photos. They don't use any sort of metal surround, and they aren't just painted on. That's because they're 3-dimensional, and that means that the lume also is 3-dimensional. And I mean, that's just such an awesome little detail for a lume freak like me. But the other really cool thing is that the 12, 6, and 9 indices are pushed back a little bit, and it's a subtle change, but it makes for a big impact when you see it. And actually, that was one of the very first things I noticed about the watch. But obviously, it's there to serve a purpose because the date window is closest to the side because it's the old GMT movement. So just to make everything look a little bit more equal, they pushed everything else back, but I'm all for it. It works out. So what we don't have here is a Black Bay 58 GMT, which is something that we've been waiting for forever, and it's something that I absolutely would love to see at some point. But given that Tudor is using the old GMT movement, the date would only accommodate a watch with a thinner bezel, which means that it had to be something like this. and that's why a dive watch, you know, with a thicker bezel just wouldn't have worked. So, I mean, I guess we got squeezed out just by some, you know, penny pinching, I guess. Oh, and I almost completely forgot about the new bracelet clasp. And yes, it has the new T-Fit quick adjust system that was brought on in the Black Bay 58 bronze. And as far as I can tell, it's pretty much a glide lock system, which is a great system, but for me, nothing can really get close to the ease of using the Pelagos clasp. So I'm kind of a bit spoiled on that. Yeah, it's still a huge step up, which will help the sizing, just because, you know, I've never been a fan of the Tudor bracelets, you know, other than the Pelagos one. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because my main complaint was lack of micro adjustment and many other things, but that's really the main thing. And then it's the elephant in the room, and this is why I didn't want to post an immediate reaction, because my reaction at the start was very different from what it is right now. And you know, I still really love the watch, but there are some potentially very big issues, and one of the main things is the thickness. So in my head, I assumed that the Black Bay Pro was naturally going to have a brand new, smaller 39mm sized GMT movement, but as it turns out, they are using the exact same movement that's in the 41mm Black Bay GMT, the MT5652, and yeah, that watch wore so thick that I bought it and then I returned it. But using the same movement makes the thickness of the Black Bay Pro 14.6mm. I mean, one good thing about them using an older movement is that it keeps the price of the watch down, but you know, other than that, I mean, it's kind of bizarre that they use the same movement, because this means that they could have given us a smaller GMT watch, you know, much earlier. I mean, I thought that there wasn't a smaller GMT watch just because they were developing a smaller and thinner GMT movement to put it in something the size of a 58. So obviously the only way to figure out whether or not it's going to wear thick is to wear it on wrist. I mean, that's just a given. But I do think that I figured out, you know, why exactly the thickness shouldn't be too much of a problem in real life, and that'll probably wear closer to the high 13mm range, like 13.7-ish or something like that. And that's based on logic and some relatively easy math, I guess. So yeah, first off, my thought process is based off of one assumption, and that's that the bracelet links on the Black Bay Pro are going to be the same thickness as the links on the Black Bay Blue, and that for sure is not a stretch to imagine, just because, you know, like, why would they spend more money on a brand new bracelet for a watch that's pretty much the same size as all their other Black Bay 58s? So there we go. So okay, let's get into the details. And yeah, I mean, I enjoy this sort of investigative, simple math of sorts, you know, but I am not a math person at all. So let me know if I did anything wrong, so that we can get a better picture of this new case. And I'm actually kind of excited to finally get my hands on the watch to see like how close my measurements are to the real thing, you know, based on my calculations. The links on my Black Bay 58 Blue are 3.3mm thick, and then the mid case at the point just before the bezel is flush with the mid case is 6.1mm. So in Watch Advisor's video of the Black Bay Pro, he shows the profile of the Black Bay Pro, and I pause it at the moment where the case side is shown with one of the links. So I measured the link on my screen to be 11.1mm, and the mid case right before the bezel is flush with the case side comes out to 27.9mm. So the Black Bay Pro to Black Bay 58 size ratio is 11.1 divided by 3.3, which is 3.36, which is the I mean, what's the math term for it? I mean, it's not coefficient. I mean, like, the Black Bay coefficient. I mean, that does sound pretty good. I'm gonna stick with that, even if it's wrong. So then the 27.9mm, which is the Black Bay Pro thickness, divided by the Black Bay coefficient of 3.36, means that the thickness of the Black Bay Pro mid case is 8.30mm, which means the difference in the mid case thicknesses between the two watches is 2.2mm. The total thickness of the Black Bay 58 is 11.8mm as I measure it, and the Black Bay Pro is said to be 14.6 millimeters, so the difference is 2.8 millimeters, which means that the entire thickness increase wasn't just thrown into the mid case, which is by far the most important factor in how thick a watch looks and feels, and that's why the Black Bay 58, Black Bay 41 GMT feels so thick with the slab sides, and that's why Seikos, especially the Marine Master and the Speedmaster, really don't wear it very thick at all. So in other words, 0.6 millimeters has gone into the case back and bezel crystal, which for me is pretty much renders them as negligible, just because for me, increases in those areas, you know, pretty much disappear when the watch is actually on the wrist. I mean, much like the Black Bay 58 925 with the extra millimeter case back, literally no change in wearing experience, other than obviously that it's heavier, which makes a bigger deal, but that's different. But to go further, I calculated the bezel and the crystal thickness of the Black Bay Pro to 3.48 millimeters, which then leads to the case back being 2.82 millimeters. The Black Bay 58 crystal bezel is 3.4 millimeters, which means that the case back is 2.3 millimeters. And that means, once again, hope you're following me, that means that the Black Bay Pro case back is 0.5 millimeter thicker than the Black Bay 58. For me, like I said, a slightly thicker case back doesn't play into the thickness of the watch very much. And of course, you know, 0.1 millimeters on the crystal won't make a difference either way. And going even further, we can see in the video that there's that at the bottom of the mid case, there's a bevel going inwards, which means that that portion will play with the light and just, you know, trick our eyes to help decrease the overall slab-sidedness of the watch a little bit. And that bevel comes out to be 0.95 millimeters, which leaves the Black Bay Pro mid case to be effectively 7.35 millimeters, which isn't very much more than the Black Bay 58's 6.1 millimeters. You know, so all in all, I mean, at this point, I think that the watch will wear more like a big 13.5 millimeter watch, which is still a lot, but not as crazy as what I thought initially when they released that it's going to be 14.6 millimeters thick. But, you know, to be honest, this really never should have been a problem, just because they really just should have made a Black Bay 58 size GMT movement. It's been 4 years since that. So, or I mean, maybe this entire thing is just like my way of coping with a watch that is too thick. Oh god, I spent a lot of time on that, but I hope you enjoyed that last part. And if you did, go ahead and hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell button and all those buttons, and so you can stay on top of what's happening here, especially because I'm pretty sure that I'll have this Black Bay Pro on the channel very soon. And yeah, until the next video, good day.